The desert wind carried more than dust through the streets of Dustwater that September afternoon. It carried whispers of trouble, the metallic scent of coming violence, and the weight of 100 unspoken grudges. Jake Sullivan knew that Smellwell had lived with it for 20-odd years since he'd first strapped iron to his hip. He sat in the corner of Murphy's saloon, nursing a whiskey that had seen better days, much like everything else in this forgotten corner of Arizona territory. At 43, Jake had the weathered look of a man who'd ridden too many hard trails and seen too many sunsets through gun smoke. His face bore the map of those years, a scar through his left eyebrow from a Comanche arrow, another along his jaw from a saloon brawl in Tombstone, and crow's feet earned from squinting into too many desert suns. The saloon door swung open, bringing a shaft of harsh light and a figure that made every man in the room sit up straighter. She wasn't the kind of woman who usually graced Murphy's establishment. Her dress, though dusty from travel, spoke of better times and Eastern sensibilities. Auburn hair pinned up proper, green eyes that held both fear and defiance, and a straight-backed walk that said she wouldn't be broken easily. Clara Morrison had been walking for 3 days, her feet blistered inside boots meant for church socials, not desert crossings. She'd sold her horse 2 towns back for food money, keeping only what she could carry. Now, standing in the doorway of this rough saloon, she knew she'd reached the end of her rope, but she'd be damned if she'd let these men see it. Well, well, came a voice from the bar. Bill Hawkins unfolded himself from his stool like a snake uncurling in the sun. 6 feet of mean wrapped in leather and spite, with a smile that never reached his cold blue eyes. "What have we here, a lady come calling?" Jake's hand instinctively moved closer to his Colt .45. He'd tangled with Hawkins before nothing serious, just enough to know the man was poison dressed in spurs and leather. Clara lifted her chin. "I'm looking for work, honest work." The laughter that rippled through the saloon was ugly. Hawkins stepped closer, his spurs ringing against the floorboards like death bells. Honest work in Dustwater. His eyes traveled over her in a way that made Jake's jaw clench. "I might have some work for you, sweetheart. Private work." "I can cook," Clara said steadily, though Jake caught the slight tremor in her voice. "Clean, 10 bar if needed." "That's so." Hawkins reached out, fingering the fabric of her sleeve. "Silk. Real silk. You're a long way from home, aren't you, princess?" Clara jerked back. "Don't touch me." The saloon went quiet. In places like Dustwater, women didn't tell men like Bill Hawkins what to do. Jake set down his glass with deliberate care. "Feisty." Hawkins's smile widened. "I like that. Tell you what, you come work for me, and I'll make sure you're well taken care of. Fed, housed, protected." The last word dripped with implications that made Jake's stomach turn. "I said honest work." Clara's voice was steel now, though her hands shook. Hawkins's face darkened. "You saying I'm not honest?" "I'm saying I'm not interested." The slap came fast, snapping Clara's head to the side. She stumbled but didn't fall, one hand flying to her reddening cheek. The room held its breath. Jake was on his feet before he'd made the conscious decision to move. "That's enough, Hawkins." Every eye swung to him. Bill Hawkins turned slowly, his hand hovering near his gun. "Jake Sullivan, should have known you'd stick your nose where it don't belong." "Lady said she's not interested." Jake's voice was calm as a mountain lake, but his eyes promised violence. "In my book, that ends the conversation." "Your book?" Hawkins laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Last I checked, you weren't the law in Dustwater. Hell, you're not even welcome in most towns anymore. Heard tell you shot Tom McCready up in Denver." McCready drew first. Jake stepped away from his table. Creating space. In gunfights. Space was life. Just like you're thinking of doing now. The tension stretched taut as wire. Clara stood frozen between them, smart enough not to move. The other patrons slowly edged toward the walls. Murphy, the bartender, began moving bottles off the bar with practiced efficiency. You really want to die for some woman you don't even know? Hawkins asked. Jake's smile was thin as paper. I've died for worse reasons. But here's the thing. Bill, I'm not the one who's going to die today. Something in Jake's eyes must have convinced him. Hawkins was mean, but he wasn't stupid. He knew Jake Sullivan's reputation, knew the man had put more than a dozen men in the ground, each one faster than the last corpse. This ain't over, Hawkins said finally. He looked at Clara, and his smile returned. You'll come around, sweetheart. They always do. And when Jake here gets tired of playing hero, I'll be waiting. He turned and walked out, taking 2 of his boys with him. The saloon exhaled collectively. Jake looked at Clara, taking in the angry red mark on her cheek, the way she held herself together through sheer will. You hurt. No, her voice was steady, but he saw the way her hands trembled. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. Hawkins doesn't forget. Neither does his boss. His boss, Samuel Morrison, owns half this territory, or thinks he does. The color drained from Clara's face so fast Jake thought she might faint. Morrison. Jake's eyes narrowed. You know him. She opened her mouth, closed it, then straightened her spine. He's my brother-in-law, my late husband's brother. Well, hell. Jake had stepped into something bigger than a saloon confrontation. He could see it in her eyes, the fear that went deeper than Hawkins's wandering hands. The exhaustion of someone who'd been running hard and long. Come on, he said, making the decision that would change both their lives. Let's get you somewhere safe. Then you can tell me why you're running from Samuel Morrison. Clara hesitated. I don't even know your name. Jake Sullivan. He touched the brim of his hat. And before you ask, yes, I've done bad things. Yes, I've killed men, but I've never hurt a woman, and I don't cotton to those who do. She studied him for a long moment, green eyes searching his weathered face. Whatever she found there must have satisfied her. Clara Morrison, and Mr. Sullivan. I'm not running from Samuel. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. I'm running for my life. Jake led her out of the saloon, aware of the eyes following them. The sun was brutal, hammering down on the dusty street. His horse, a bay gelding named Chance, stood patient at the hitching post. There's a boarding house 2 streets over. Jake said, Ma Cunningham runs it. She's tough as old leather and doesn't ask questions. As they walked, Jake noticed the way Clara moved careful, considered, like someone who'd learned to be aware of her surroundings the hard way. Her dress might speak of Eastern privilege, but her eyes belonged to someone who'd seen the elephant, as they said. Mr. Sullivan, she said as they turned the corner. Why did you help me? Jake was quiet for a moment. Truth was, he didn't rightly know. Maybe it was the way she'd stood up to Hawkins, spine straight despite the fear. Maybe it was because he was tired of watching the Bill Hawkins of the world take whatever they wanted. Or maybe it was something in her eyes that reminded him of another woman, long ago, one he'd failed to save. Call it a weakness for lost causes, he said finally. Clara surprised him by laughing a short, bitter sound. Then you found the right cause. I'm about as lost as they come. The boarding house squatted on the corner like a tired dog. Paint peeling, porch sagging, but clean curtains in the windows. Ma Cunningham herself answered Jake's knock 60 if she was a day. Built like a frontier fort, with eyes that had seen everything twice. Jake Sullivan, she said. Not quite a greeting. Her eyes moved to Clara, took in the mark on her cheek, the quality of her dress, the fear hidden behind pride. Trouble. When is it not? Jake replied. Lady needs a room, quiet like. Ma Cunningham studied Clara for another moment. You running from the law, girl? No, ma'am. Clara met her gaze steadily. From those who think they are the law. That seemed to satisfy the older woman. 25 cents a night, meals extra, no men in the rooms, no liquor, no trouble. I have money, Clara said, reaching for a small purse. Jake put a hand on her arm. I've got it. He handed Ma Cunningham $2 silver for the week, and Ma Bill Hawkins comes around asking questions. I run a respectable establishment, Ma Cunningham said firmly. I don't gossip with trash. She led them inside, upstairs that creaked with age. The room was small but clean iron bed, washstand, single window overlooking the alley. Clara stood in the middle of it like she'd forgotten what walls looked like. I'll leave you to settle, Jake said, suddenly awkward. But Mrs. Morrison. Clara, she corrected softly. Clara, this ain't over. Hawkins will come looking, and when he finds out who you are... He let the threat hang unspoken. She sank onto the bed, suddenly looking very young and very tired. I know. I've been running for 2 months. Mr. Sullivan, Samuel's reach is long. What's he want with you? Clara's laugh was bitter as alkali water. What he's always wanted? My husband's money, the land, everything. When James died, she stopped, composed herself. When my husband died, I thought the law would protect me. I was wrong. Jake had heard this story before. Different faces. Same ending. Rich men taking what they wanted. The law looking the other way. He kill your husband. Her eyes snapped to his, sharp as glass. I can't prove it, but James was healthy as a horse one day, dead the next. The doctor said heart failure. She shook her head. James was 28 years old. And Morrison inherited. That's just it. He didn't. James left everything to me. Samuel was furious, started spreading stories, saying I'd poisoned James, that I was a woman of loose morals who'd seduced his brother for money. Her voice broke slightly. By the time he was done, I had a warrant on my head and a $500 bounty. Jake let out a low whistle. $500 would bring every bounty hunter and desperate man in 3 territories. So you ran. So I ran. She looked up at him, and for the first time, he saw past the pride to the exhaustion beneath. I've been Clara Smith, Clara Jones, a dozen other names, but they always find me, always. She stood, moved to the window. I should leave, tonight, before I bring more trouble to your town. Dustwater's got plenty of trouble already, Jake said. One more won't hurt. She turned to face him, backlit by the window. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I could be everything Samuel says. Jake considered her question. He'd asked himself the same thing. Maybe you are. Maybe you poisoned your husband for his money. Maybe you're the devil in a pretty dress. He shrugged. But I've been around long enough to know the smell of fear. Real fear. And lady, you're scared right down to your bones. In my experience, people running that scared are usually running from something worse than what they'd done. Clara's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Thank you, she whispered. Jake touched his hat. Get some rest. I'll be around. He was at the door when she called out. Mr. Sullivan Jake. It was the first time she'd used his given name. What you said in the saloon about dying for worse reasons. What did you mean? Jake paused, his hand on the doorknob. 20 years of memories crowded in faces of men he'd killed, causes he'd fought for that turned to dust, ideals that withered under the desert sun. Sometimes a man gets to a point where dying for something good seems like a fair trade, even if it's just standing up to a snake like Hawkins. He looked back at her. Been a long time since I did something worth doing. He left before she could respond, closing the door soft behind him. In the hallway, he met Ma Cunningham's knowing gaze. She's in trouble deep, the older woman said. I know. You fixing to help her? Jake settled his hat on his head. Appears so. Ma Cunningham studied him shrewdly. You always were a fool for a pretty face and a sad story. This is different. They always are. But she smiled, taking the sting from her words. I'll keep an eye on her. But Jake, you watch yourself. Bill Hawkins is mean, but he's not the worst of them. Not by half. Jake knew she was right. He'd just declared war on Bill Hawkins, and by extension, Samuel Morrison, for a woman he'd known less than an hour, whose story might be lies built on lies. But walking down those creaking stairs, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Purpose. Maybe it would get him killed, but there were worse ways to go than protecting someone who needed it. The sun was setting when he stepped outside, painting dust water in shades of red and gold. Somewhere out there, Bill Hawkins was nursing his pride and planning revenge. Somewhere beyond that, Samuel Morrison was tightening his net. Jake Sullivan had lived 43 years by one rule: don't get involved. In the span of an afternoon, he'd thrown that rule to the desert wind, all for a woman with green eyes and troubles deeper than the Grand Canyon. He'd called himself a fool for lost causes. Walking toward the livery stable where he'd bed down for the night, Jake smiled grimly. If Clara Morrison was a lost cause, at least she was an interesting one, and after 20 years of drifting like smoke, maybe it was time to stand for something again. Even if it killed him. The desert night wrapped around dust water like a cold blanket. Stars scattered across the sky like spilled silver. Jake had made his camp a quarter-mile outside town, far enough to avoid unwanted company, but close enough to hear trouble if it came calling. His fire crackled low, casting dancing shadows on the red rocks that surrounded his simple bedroll. He just poured himself coffee thick as mud and twice as bitter when he heard footsteps. His hand found his Colt before his mind registered the sound. 20 years of staying alive had taught him to shoot first and apologize to corpses later. Mr. Sullivan. The voice was soft, uncertain. Jake. He relaxed fractionally, but kept his hand near the gun. That's far enough. Step into the light. Clara Morrison emerged from the darkness like a ghost made flesh. She'd traded her Eastern dress for something more practical: men's pants, a worn shirt, boots that actually fit for walking. Her hair was down now, catching copper sparks from the firelight. How'd you find me? Jake asked. Ma Cunningham told me where you camp. She hesitated at the edge of the fire's reach. May I? Jake gestured to a flat rock across from him. Your funeral, though you'd be safer in town. Safer? Clara's laugh was bitter. I haven't been safe since James died. She settled onto the rock, pulling a blanket around her shoulders, his spare. He noticed that he'd left with Ma Cunningham. I couldn't sleep. The walls, after 2 months of running. Walls feel like a trap. Jake understood that. He'd felt it himself more times than he could count. Coffee? Please. He poured her a cup from his battered pot, watched her wrap her hands around it like she was holding onto life itself. In the firelight, he could see what daylight and fear had hidden the fine bones of her face, the determined set of her jaw, the way she held herself like she was ready to run at any moment. You want to tell me about it? He asked finally. All of it, not just the parts that make you look good. Clara stared into the fire for a long moment. You ever been married? Jake. Once, long time ago. What happened to her? Jake's jaw tightened. Apache raid. I was out hunting. Came back to ashes and graves. The words came out flat. Matter of fact. He'd told the story enough times that it had lost its edges, worn smooth like river stone. Only in dreams did it still cut. I'm sorry. It was 20 years ago. Your turn. Clara took a sip of coffee, grimaced at the bitterness. I met James Morrison when I was 18. He was visiting Boston, buying cattle for his ranch. She smiled at the memory. He was nothing like the men I knew, rough around the edges but gentle underneath. He could make me laugh until my sides hurt, then turn around and discuss Shakespeare like a professor. Sounds like a good man. He was too good for this world. Maybe. The smile faded. We married against his family's wishes. Samuel especially was furious. Said James was betraying their father's memory by bringing an Eastern woman to the ranch. Said I'd make him soft. But James didn't care. James never cared what anyone thought. It was one of the things I loved about him. She stared into the fire. We had 3 good years. 3 years of working side by side, building something real. The ranch prospered. James had a head for business, and I learned to ride, to shoot, to read the weather and the cattle. I was happy. Jake heard the past tense, heavy as lead. Then James started getting sick. Little things at first, headaches, dizzy spells. Samuel said it was the heat, that his brother was going soft just like he'd predicted. But it got worse. The doctor from Tucson couldn't find anything wrong. Said maybe it was his heart. Weak constitution. Her voice turned hard. James could work 16 hours in blazing heat and still have energy to dance with me after supper. Weak constitution, my eye. You think Samuel poisoned him? Clara met his eyes straight on. I know he did. Just can't prove it. Samuel was always bringing James tonics, special medicines from back east. Said it would help with the headaches. James trusted him, they were brothers. After all. She laughed bitterly. I should have seen it. Should have stopped it. Hindsight's perfect, Jake said quietly. Living forward is harder. James died on a Tuesday. Just collapsed in the barn. By the time I got to him, he was gone. Her voice broke slightly, but she pushed on. Samuel showed up the next day with papers. Said James had signed over the ranch to him. That I was to pack my things and leave. When I showed him James's real will, the one leaving everything to me, he called me a forger and worse. Let me guess, the sheriff was in his pocket. The sheriff, the judge, half the town. Within a week, I had a warrant for murder and theft. Samuel told everyone I'd seduced his brother, poisoned him for his money. Said he had witnesses who'd seen me buying arsenic. Did you? Clara's eyes flashed. To kill rats in the barn. But that detail got lost in the telling. Jake nodded. He'd seen how truth could be twisted, shaped into whatever powerful men needed it to be. So you ran. So I ran. She set down her coffee cup, pulled the blanket tighter. 2 months of staying ahead of bounty hunters and hired guns. 2 months of jumping at shadows, never sleeping more than a few hours, always moving. She looked at him across the fire. I'm tired, Jake, so damn tired. The silence stretched between them, comfortable as old leather. The fire popped, sending sparks spiraling into the darkness. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled, answered by another. Why'd you really come out here tonight? Jake asked finally. Clara was quiet for a moment. I suppose I wanted to thank you properly. For today. For standing up to Hawkins when you had no cause to. Had cause enough. Don't cotton to men who hit women. Still, you risked your life for a stranger. That means something. Jake shrugged. Life hasn't been worth much lately. Might as well risk it for something decent. She studied him across the fire. Ma Cunningham says you're a famous gunslinger. Says you've killed more men than cholera. Ma exaggerates. Do you deny it? Jake met her gaze steadily. No, I've killed men. Some needed killing. Some were just faster than the other fellow. Some, he trailed off. Some were just in the wrong place when I was in a killing mood. And that doesn't bother you? Used to, now, he shrugged again. Man makes his choices. I made mine. Can't unmake them now. Clara leaned forward. But you can make new ones. Better ones. Like getting myself killed protecting a woman who might be a poisoner. She flinched but didn't look away. Do you think I am? Jake considered her, the steady gaze, the straight spine, the hands that didn't tremble despite the danger closing in. No, I've known killers. Hell, I am one. You don't have the look. What look is that? The look of someone who can live with it easy. You're carrying guilt. Sure enough. But it's not killer's guilt. It's the guilt of someone who thinks they should have done more, been smarter, seen it coming. He smiled grimly. I know that look. See it every morning in the shaving mirror. Clara's eyes softened. Your wife. Among other failures, Jake stood, threw another piece of mesquite on the fire. But we're not talking about my ghosts tonight. Question is, what do you plan to do about yours? I don't know. The admission came out small. Lost. I've been running so long. I don't know how to stop. And now, she gestured helplessly. Now I've brought my trouble to your door. Hawkins won't forget what happened today. Hawkins is small potatoes. It's Morrison I'm thinking about. Man doesn't put a $500 bounty on someone unless he's serious about seeing them dead. Or unless they have something he needs. Clara reached into her shirt, pulled out a leather pouch on a cord around her neck. James didn't just leave me the ranch. He left me this. She opened the pouch, spilled its contents into her palm, in the firelight. Jake could see Paper's legal documents from the look of them, and something else, a small key, ornate and old-looking. Deed to the ranch, Clara explained. James's real will, witnessed and notarized, and this. She held up the key. James gave it to me the night before he died. Said if anything happened to him, I was to take it to a banker in San Francisco. Marcus Chen said Mr. Chen would know what to do. Jake frowned. What's it open? I don't know. James wouldn't say. Just kept repeating that I had to get to San Francisco. Had to find Chen. She carefully returned everything to the pouch. I was trying to get there when the warrant came down. Been trying ever since, but Morrison's men keep pushing you south and east, away from California. Every time I head west, they're there. It's like they know. They probably do. Morrison's got money for telegraphs, informants. You're being herded. Clara, question is, why doesn't he just have you killed? Clara tucked the pouch back inside her shirt. Because he needs the key. Whatever it opens, he can't get to it without this. That's the only reason I'm still alive. Jake stared into the fire, thinking. It was a pretty puzzle, and likely to get them both killed. Smart thing would be to wish her luck and ride out at dawn. Head to Mexico, maybe, or up to Canada. Somewhere Samuel Morrison's money couldn't reach. But when he looked up, Clara was watching him with those green eyes that held too much pain and too little hope. Something in his chest shifted, rusty gears grinding back to life. All right, he heard himself say. Here's what we're going to do. Tomorrow, you stay put at Ma Cunningham's. Don't go near the windows. Don't answer the door for anyone but me or Ma. I'm going to send some telegrams. Call in some old favors. See if we can't find out what Morrison's really after. And then we figure out how to get you to San Francisco without dying. Clara's eyes widened. Jake, you don't have to. Yes, I do. The certainty in his voice surprised them both. I made my stand today in Murphy's. No going back now. Besides, he smiled, and for the first time in years it felt real. I've been drifting for too long. Maybe it's time I found something worth fighting for again. Clara stood, moved around the fire until she was close enough to touch. I could be lying about everything. This could all be an elaborate trap. Could be. I have nothing to offer you. No money, no guarantee of survival. Just trouble and more trouble. I've got a fondness for trouble. She reached out, touched his face gently. Her fingers were soft against his weathered cheek. You're either the noblest man I've ever met or the biggest fool. Probably both. Clara laughed, and for a moment the years fell away from her face. She looked young, hopeful, alive. Then reality crashed back and she stepped away. I should go, if anyone sees me out here. I'll walk you back. No. She pulled the blanket off, handed it to him. Better if we're not seen together, safer for both of us. She started to leave, then turned back. Jake, thank you for listening, for believing me. Get some rest, he said gruffly. Tomorrow's likely to be interesting. He watched her disappear into the darkness, moving quiet as an Apache. When he was sure she was gone, He sat back down by the fire and poured himself another cup of coffee. Jake Sullivan had survived 20 years by trusting no one, caring for nothing, keeping his heart as empty as his holster was full. In one night, a green-eyed woman with impossible troubles had changed all that. He was about to go to war with one of the most powerful men in the territory, all for a woman he'd met that morning. He thought about Sarah, his wife, dead these 20 years. Wondered what she'd think of him now, risking everything for another woman's cause. Probably call him 10 kinds of fool. But then she'd smile that smile of hers and tell him to follow his heart. "Well, Sarah," he said to the stars, "looks like I'm finally doing something you'd be proud of, even if it kills me." The fire burned low as the night grew deep. Tomorrow would bring danger, maybe death, but for the first time in 20 years, Jake Sullivan had a reason to see the sunrise. It felt good. It felt like coming home. The morning sun hadn't yet cleared the mesa when Jake spotted the dust cloud. 4 riders, moving fast from the north. He'd been expecting them. Bill Hawkins wasn't the type to let yesterday's insult pass. Jake checked his Winchester, made sure his Colt sat easy in its holster, and walked out to meet trouble halfway. They found him at Skeleton Ridge, a mile outside town where the red rocks formed a natural amphitheater. Good place for killing plenty of cover. Multiple escape routes if things went south. Jake had chosen it deliberately. Hawkins rode in front, his face dark with yesterday's bruised pride. Behind him came 3 hired guns Jake didn't recognize, hard cases with dead eyes and well-worn holsters. Bounty hunters. From the look of them, the kind who'd shoot their own mothers for $50 and a bottle of whiskey. "Sullivan." Hawkins reined up 20 feet away, his hand resting casual-like on his gun. "Figured I'd find you out here. You always did like your privacy." "Bill." Jake kept his voice friendly as a rattlesnake's rattle. "Beautiful morning for a ride. You boys out enjoying the scenery?" One of the bounty hunters, a scarred Mexican with silver conchos on his gun belt, laughed ugly. "We're hunting, senor. Heard there's a murderer in town. Woman who poisoned her husband. $500, dead or alive." "That's so." Jake shifted slightly, putting the sun at his back. "Lot of money for one woman." "She's a dangerous one," Hawkins said, his smile cold as winter wind. "Killed James Morrison in cold blood, then forged papers to steal his ranch. His brother wants justice." "Funny thing about justice," Jake mused. "Changes depending on who's paying for it." Hawkins's face darkened. "You taking her side? Sullivan, that what this is?" "I'm not taking anyone's side. Just don't cotton to men who hit women, bounty or no bounty." "Noble of you." Hawkins leaned forward in his saddle. "But here's the thing, that woman's worth $500 to us. You're worth nothing but the lead it takes to drop you. Stand aside, let us do our business, and you can ride out of here vertical. Keep playing hero, and we'll plant you next to that wife of yours." The mention of Sarah hit like a punch to the gut, but Jake's face never changed. 20 years of poker and gunfights had taught him to keep his cards close and his emotions closer. "You know what your problem is, Bill," Jake said conversationally. "You talk too much." The Mexican went for his gun first. Faster than Jake had expected. But fast wasn't enough when you were drawing on a man who'd been killing for 2 decades. Jake's Colt seemed to appear in his hand, speaking twice before the Mexican's gun cleared leather. The bounty hunter toppled backward off his horse, silver conchos glinting in the morning sun. The other 2 were already moving. Jake threw himself sideways as bullets split the air where he'd been standing. He hit the ground rolling, came up behind a boulder as lead splattered rock chips around him. His Winchester was back where he'd been standing, but the Colt still had 4 shots. "Damn it, Sullivan!" Hawkins's voice came from behind another rock. "This ain't your fight." Jake didn't waste breath answering. He could hear horses moving, knew they were trying to flank him. Time to change the game. He sprinted from cover, diving and firing as one of the bounty hunters showed himself. The man spun and fell, clutching his shoulder. That left 2 Hawkins and 1 other. Jake reloaded quick, fingers working from muscle memory. A shadow moved to his left. He spun, fired twice. The third bounty hunter stumbled into view, blood spreading across his chest, then collapsed. "Just you and me now, Bill," Jake called. "How you want to play this?" Silence for a long moment. Then Hawkins emerged from cover, hands raised but ready. "You're good. Sullivan, maybe the best I've seen, but you can't protect her forever. Morrison's got deep pockets and a long memory." "I'll worry about Morrison when he shows himself. Right now, I'm worried about you." Hawkins's hand twitched toward his gun, then stopped. Something in Jake's eyes, cold and certain as death, made the decision for him. This ain't over. "It is for today." Jake kept his gun trained on Hawkins. "Take your dead and get out. Tell Morrison if he wants Clara. He'll have to come himself. I'm done talking to hired help." Hawkins's face flushed red, but he wasn't stupid enough to draw on a man who'd just dropped 3 killers in under a minute. He gathered the bodies, tying them across their horses with jerky movements that spoke of barely controlled rage. "You've signed your death warrant, Sullivan," he said, mounting up. "And hers too. Morrison don't forgive, and he don't forget." "Neither do I," Jake replied quietly. He watched until Hawkins and his grim cargo disappeared over the ridge, then retrieved his Winchester and headed back to town. The sun was fully up now, painting dust water in shades of gold and dust. He needed to check on Clara, make sure she'd stayed put during the shooting. But as he rounded the corner to Ma Cunningham's boarding house, he knew something was wrong. The front door stood open, swinging in the morning breeze. Jake broke into a run, taking the porch steps 2 at a time. "Ma!" He burst through the door, gun drawn. "Ma Cunningham!" He found her in the kitchen, tied to a chair with a nasty bruise purpling her jaw. She was conscious, eyes blazing with fury that turned to relief when she saw him. "Thank God," she gasped as he cut her bonds. "They took her. Jake took that poor girl." "Who?" But he already knew. "How many?" "2 men came in through the back while we were having breakfast. Professional-like. Not local boys." Ma rubbed her wrists, wincing. "Clara fought like a wildcat, but they had the drop on us. Said to tell you she'd be at Coyote Springs. Said you'd know what that meant." Jake's blood ran cold. Coyote Springs, an old way station 15 miles into the desert, abandoned for years after the Apache Wars. It was a perfect place for an ambush, or an execution. "How long ago?" "Maybe 20 minutes. Jake, there's something else." Ma struggled to her feet. "One of them called the other Tom. Tom Garrett. Isn't that?" "Yeah." Jake's voice was flat. "That's him." Tom Garrett. They'd ridden together once, years back, hiring out their guns to whoever paid best. Jake had thought him dead. Heard he'd caught a bullet in a range war up Montana way. Should have known better. Men like Tom Garrett were too mean to die easy. "I'm going after them," Jake said, checking his weapons. Ma grabbed his arm. "It's a trap. You know it's a trap." "I know." "Then why?" She stopped, seeing something in his face. "Oh, Jake, you've gone and done it. Haven't you gone and let her matter?" Jake didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because Ma was right. Somewhere between yesterday afternoon and this morning, Clara Morrison had become more than just another person in trouble. She'd become someone worth saving, even if it cost him everything. He was out the door before Ma could say more, heading for the livery stable. Chance was fresh, having rested all night. Jake saddled him quick, mind already working through possibilities. Tom Garrett was smart, careful. He'd have the high ground at Coyote Springs. Probably more men hidden in the rocks. This wasn't about the bounty anymore. This was about drawing Jake out, eliminating him before he could become more of a problem for Morrison. Well, they'd get what they wanted, but maybe not how they expected. Jake stopped at his camp long enough to grab extra ammunition and his spare Colt. Then he rode hard for Coyote Springs. pushing chance as fast as he dared in the morning heat. The desert stretched out endless before him, a landscape of red rock and thorny death. He was 5 miles out when he saw the rider, a lone figure on a painted pony, moving to intercept. Jake slowed, hand on his gun, then relaxed slightly. He knew that horse, knew the easy way the rider sat his saddle. "Tom," Jake said as they drew alongside each other. "Heard you were dead." Tom Garrett grinned, showing teeth white as old bones. He was older than Jake remembered, lines carved deep in his face, but his gray eyes were still sharp as a hawk's. "Heard the same about you, couple times over, yet here we are." "Here we are," Jake agreed. "You working for Morrison now?" "Man's got to eat." Tom's smile didn't waver. "Nothing personal, Jake, just business." "Taking women hostage is just business. When they're worth $500? Yes." Tom shifted in his saddle, casual-like, but Jake noticed how his hand stayed near his gun. "Could be worth $250 to you. You ride away now. My word on it." "Your word," Jake laughed, short and bitter. "What's that worth these days, Tom?" "More than your life, apparently." The smile finally faded. "Don't do this. Jake, you're outgunned, outsmarted. The woman's probably dead already." "Then I've got nothing to lose." Tom studied him for a long moment. "I'll be damned. Jake Sullivan's got feelings again. Never thought I'd see the day." He shook his head. "She must be something special." "She's someone who needs help. That's enough." "Is it really?" Tom leaned forward. "Because the Jake Sullivan I knew wouldn't risk a hangnail for anyone. The Jake I knew was smart enough to know when to fold. Maybe that Jake died somewhere along the trail. Maybe he's about to." Tom straightened. "Last chance. Right away. I'll make it quick for the woman. My word on that. Better than what Morrison's got planned." Jake met his old friend's eyes. "Can't do it, Tom." "I know." Tom's voice held something that might have been regret. "Always were too stubborn for your own good. Coyote Springs. 1 hour. Come alone, or she dies messy." He wheeled his horse and rode off without looking back. Jake watched him go, then continued toward Coyote Springs, knowing he was riding into certain death and going anyway. The old way station squatted in a box canyon, adobe walls crumbling back to dust. Jake stopped half a mile out, studied the layout through his field glasses. 2 men visible on the rim rifles. Good positions. Probably more hidden. Tom's horse was tied out front, along with 3 others. No sign of Clara. Jake left Chance hidden in an arroyo and approached on foot, using every scrap of cover. He was good at this stalking. Hunting. 20 years of practice made him a ghost in the desert. But Tom knew he was good. Would have planned for it. Sure enough, Jake was still 50 yards out when Tom's voice rang out. "That's far enough. Jake, show yourself. Hands where I can see them." Jake stepped into the open, hands raised but ready. Tom emerged from the station, and Jake's heart sank. He had Clara in front of him, arm around her throat, gun to her temple. Her face was pale but composed, green eyes finding Jake's across the distance. "Let her go. Tom!" Jake called. "This is between us." "No, it's between you and Morrison. I'm just the hired help. Remember?" Tom's grip on Clara tightened. "Here's how this plays. You drop your guns, all of them. My boys tie you up. We all ride back to Morrison, collect our money. Simple. And then Morrison kills us both. Probably, but that's not my problem." Jake met Clara's eyes. She gave the tiniest shake of her head. "Don't do it," those green eyes said. "Don't die for me." But Jake was already unbuckling his gun belt, letting it fall. The spare Colt followed. Then the knife from his boot. He stood there unarmed, hands spread wide. Satisfied. "Jake, no!" Clara struggled against Tom's grip. "He's going to kill you anyway." "Quiet, woman." Tom pressed the gun harder against her temple. "All right, Jake, nice and easy now. Walk forward. Hands on your head. Jake took 1 step. 2. On the 3rd. Clara moved. She went limp suddenly, all her weight dropping. Tom, caught off guard, had to adjust his grip. It was only for a second, but a second was all Jake needed. The Derringer he'd palmed from his boot, a 2-shot .41 his wife had given him 20 years ago, appeared in his hand. The first shot took Tom in the shoulder, spinning him away from Clara. She hit the ground, rolling clear as Jake dove for his guns. Rifle fire erupted from the rim, bullets kicking up dust around him. He grabbed the Colt, firing up at the rim as he scrambled for cover. Clara had found shelter behind a water trough, Tom's dropped pistol in her hands. She was shooting at something Jake couldn't see. More men coming from the station. "How many?" Jake yelled, reloading. "3 more inside." She ducked as bullets splintered the trough. "Jake, behind you." He spun, firing instinctively. One of the riflemen had climbed down, trying to flank them. Jake's bullet caught him center mass, dropping him in a heap. It was chaos now, lead flying from all directions. Jake made it to Clara's position, adding his fire to hers. Tom was down but not out, crawling toward cover, leaving a blood trail in the dust. "We need to move," Jake said, scanning for options. "They'll pin us down here." "The station," Clara gasped, pointing. "If we can get inside." "Go!" Jake rose, laying down covering fire. Clara sprinted for the door, Jake right behind her. Bullets whined past like angry hornets. They crashed through the doorway, Jake slamming it shut behind them. The inside was dim, dusty. 2 men were trying to reload by a window. Clara shot one, Jake the other. Then silence, broken only by their ragged breathing. "You hurt?" Jake asked, checking her over. "No, you." "I'm fine." He wasn't. A bullet had creased his ribs, blood soaking his shirt, but there'd be time for that later. If they lived. "Can you watch the back?" Clara nodded, moving to cover the rear door with Tom's pistol. She handled it well, James had taught her, or she'd learned on the run. Either way, Jake was impressed. "Tom," he called out the window. "You still breathing?" "Still here, Jake." The voice was pained but strong. "This complicates things." "Surrender. Tom, it's over." Tom's laugh turned into a cough. "You know, Morrison, there's no surrender. Not for any of us. He gets what he wants or everyone dies." Jake knew he was right, but he also knew something else. The sound of horses, coming fast. A lot of them. "Company coming," he told Clara. She moved to a window, peered out carefully. "Jake," her voice was strange. "That's not Morrison's men." Jake looked. Riders were pouring into the canyon, a dozen, maybe more. But instead of the hired guns he expected, these men wore badges, real ones. And leading them. Well, I'll be damned. Jake muttered, "Tom, you seeing this?" "Yeah." Tom sounded as surprised as Jake felt. "That's Marshal Coleman from Tucson. What the hell is he doing here?" The marshal, a big man with iron-gray hair and a face like weathered granite, rode straight into the middle of the killing ground. "This is Marshal Coleman!" His voice boomed. "Everyone drop your weapons. Anyone fires a shot, my men will cut you down." Jake and Clara exchanged looks. This changed everything. Or maybe nothing, depending on whether Coleman was honest law or another man in Morrison's pocket. Only one way to find out. "Clara," Jake said quietly, "whatever happens next, you stay behind me. If this goes bad..." "It won't." She touched his arm, and her smile was brave as sunrise. "We've come this far. We'll see it through." Jake nodded, took a deep breath, and stepped out to meet whatever justice looked like in the territory of Arizona. Behind him. Clara followed, still holding Tom's gun but pointed at the ground. The game had changed. Now they'd see who held the winning hand. The first snow of winter came early to Tom Garrett's ranch, dusting the valley with white silence. Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching Jake work with the horses in the corral. 3 weeks had passed since Coyote Springs. 3 weeks since Marshal Coleman had arrested Bill Hawkins and revealed that he'd been investigating Samuel Morrison for months. The warrant for Clara had been withdrawn, but Morrison himself remained free, protected by lawyers and distance. "He's favoring that left side again," Tom said from his chair by the fire. His shoulder was still bandaged, arm in a sling, but the fever had broken days ago. "Stubborn fool won't admit he's hurting." Clara smiled without turning. "Pot calling the kettle black. Tom Garrett, didn't I catch you trying to saddle a horse yesterday?" "That's different. I've got work needs doing." "So does he." Clara's voice softened. "He's trying to earn his keep. Doesn't feel right taking your hospitality without giving something back." Tom snorted. "Jake Sullivan never took charity in his life, even when we were younger, riding together. He'd rather go hungry than accept a handout." He shifted, wincing. "Course, that was before his wife died. Before she made him human." Tom's eyes found hers. "You're doing the same thing, making him remember how to feel." Clara turned from the window. "I'm not trying to—" "Didn't say you were trying, just saying it's happening." Tom studied her. "Question is, what are you planning to do about it?" Before Clara could answer, the door opened, bringing Jake in a swirl of snow. He stomped his boots on the threshold, hat white with frost. "Storm's coming in fast. Move the horses to the barn." His eyes found Clara immediately, checking she was all right, a habit he developed that made her heart do strange things. "Coffee's hot," she said, already pouring him a cup. Their fingers brushed as he took it, and she felt that familiar spark, like touching lightning. "Tom's ranch hands get back yet?" Jake asked, warming his hands on the mug. "Not yet." Tom frowned. "Should have been back from town yesterday. This storm hits full force. They'll be stuck in Prescott for days." Jake and Clara exchanged glances. They'd been expecting this Morrison making his move while they were vulnerable. The ranch was isolated, defensible, but also cut off from help. "I'll ride out, check the North Pass." Jake said. "In this weather," Clara protested. "Jake, you can barely see 10 feet. Which is why I need to go now, before it gets worse." He set down his coffee, was already reaching for his gun belt. "Tom, you still got that Winchester in the E." The window exploded in a shower of glass. Clara hit the floor instinctively, Jake covering her with his body as more shots punched through the walls. Tom rolled from his chair, good arm reaching for the shotgun propped nearby. "How many?" Jake yelled over the gunfire. Tom peered through a crack in the wall. 8, maybe 10, coming from the tree line. Jake helped Clara behind the heavy oak table, then joined Tom at the window. "Morrison's men." "Has to be," Tom grimaced. "Waited for the storm, just like we figured." The firing stopped, replaced by an eerie silence broken only by the wind. Then a voice called out cultured, cold, familiar. "Mrs. Morrison Clara, dear sister-in-law, let's discuss this like civilized people." Clara's face went white. "Samuel!" Jake put a hand on her shoulder. "Easy, he's just trying to rattle you." "I know you're in there," Samuel Morrison continued. His voice carried easily despite the wind. "You and that killer Sullivan, even Tom Garrett, I must admit, I'm impressed. Quite the collection of desperados you've assembled." "What do you want?" "Morrison," Jake called back. "What I've always wanted. What's rightfully mine." Samuel's voice hardened. "My brother's widow has something that belongs to me. A key. Give it to me. And you can all ride away. Even you, Sullivan. I'm feeling generous." Clara's hand went instinctively to the pouch at her throat. The key James had given her. The one she was supposed to take to San Francisco. After weeks of hiding, protecting it had become second nature. "Go to hell, Morrison!" Tom shouted. Such language, and from a former Texas Ranger. Tom, isn't it? Yes, I know all about you. Dishonorably discharged, turned hired gun. You're protecting a murderess, you know. Only murderer here is you, Jake replied. We know you poisoned James. Silence for a moment. When Samuel spoke again, his voice was amused. Prove it. Oh, wait, you can't, because there's no evidence, no witnesses. Just the ravings of a woman who seduced my poor brother and... I loved him? Clara was on her feet before Jake could stop her. Rage overcoming fear. I loved James more than you ever could. You killed him for money, for land, for... A bullet smashed through the window inches from her head. Jake yanked her down, heart pounding. Damn it, Clara! Such spirit, Samuel called. James always did like spirited women. It was his weakness. His voice turned businesslike. You have 1 hour. Give me the key, or we burn the ranch with you inside. Your choice. The wind howled, driving snow against the walls. Jake looked around the ranch house, solid construction, but wood and timber. It would burn, storm or no storm. We need that key, Clara, Tom said quietly. Maybe we can negotiate. No. Clara's voice was steel. James died protecting whatever that key opens. I won't betray him. Then we fight, Jake said simply. Tom laughed, short and bitter. 3 against 10 with me wounded and a storm closing in. Wouldn't be the first time we'd faced bad odds. Jake checked his ammunition. Remember that thing in Sonora? We were younger then, and there were 6 of us. Details. Jake moved to another window, studying angles. Clara, can you shoot? James taught me. Good. Tom, you take the back. Anyone comes through that door. I know my business. Tom interrupted. Then, softer. Jake, if this goes bad. It won't. But if it does, tell my Mary. He stopped. Hell, you know what to tell her. Jake nodded. Mary Garrett had died 3 winters back, but Tom still talked to her sometimes. Another ghost in a land full of them. They settled in to wait. Weapons ready, snow building against the windows like a shroud. Clara pressed close to Jake in the dim light. I'm sorry, she whispered, for bringing this trouble to you both. You didn't bring anything, Jake said. Morrison brought it. You're just standing up to him. He looked at her. Really looked, even now, faced with death. She held that spine straight, chin high. Takes courage. I'm terrified, she admitted. Courage isn't about not being scared. It's about doing what needs doing anyway. He touched her face, gentle as snow. You're the bravest woman I've known. Something passed between them then, electric in the cold air. Clara leaned into his touch. Jake, if we don't... Shh. He pressed his forehead to hers. We're going to get through this, all of us. Then we're riding to San Francisco, finding that banker, and ending this proper... You really think... The world exploded in fire and smoke. The barn Morrison's men had fired the barn, even through the storm. Jake could see flames leaping high, probably using coal oil. The horses screamed, trapped inside. The animals... Clara started to rise, but Jake held her back. It's a trap. They fire the barn, wait for us to run out trying to save the stock. His jaw clenched. Tom, can you... Tom was already moving, ignoring his wounded shoulder. There's a side door. Cover me. Tom, no. But the old ranger was gone. Slipping out the back into the storm, Jake cursed, moved to cover him. Through the swirling snow, he saw Tom reach the barn, saw him fumbling with the latch. The rifle shot was almost lost in the wind. Tom spun, fell, tried to rise. Another shot dropped him in the snow, red spreading beneath him. Tom, Jake started for the door, but Clara grabbed him. You can't help him, Jake. Please. She was right. Tom wasn't moving, and going out there would just add another body to the snow. Jake's vision went red, then cold as winter iron. Samuel Morrison had just signed his death warrant. "Stay down," he told Clara, voice flat as a grave marker. "What are you, Jake?" "No," but he was already moving. Not toward the door Morrison would expect that. Instead, he went up, using the ladder to the loft Tom used for storage. There, a loading door opened onto the roof, perfect for a man who'd spent years hunting Apache in vertical country. The roof was slick with snow, treacherous. Jake belly-crawled to the edge, spotted Morrison's men spread in a rough circle. They were watching the doors, the windows. None looked up. He took the nearest one first, a clean shot that dropped the man silent in the snow. Shifted position, found another. The Winchester spoke again. By the time Morrison's men realized death was coming from above, Jake had cut their number in half. "The roof!" someone screamed. "He's on the damn roof!" Bullets split the air around him. Jake rolled, slid, came up shooting. Another man down. But they were adjusting now, finding cover, returning fire with discipline. A bullet creased his thigh. Another punched through his coat. Time to move. He dropped through the loading door just as Clara screamed below. Jake hit the loft floor, rolled, came up to see Samuel Morrison in the house. Gun pointed at Clara's head. Morrison looked nothing like his brother, where James had been sun-weathered and solid. Samuel was pale as paper, soft from easy living. But his eyes were cold as coffin nails. "Ah, the famous Jake Sullivan." Morrison didn't look up, keeping his gun steady on Clara. "James wrote about you in his letters, said you were the best he'd ever seen. I'm almost honored." "Let her go. Morrison, this is between men." "Is it?" Morrison smiled. "I offered a civilized solution. You chose violence. Poor Tom learned that lesson." His smile widened. "Did you know he was still alive when we set him on fire? The barn collapsed on him, but I swear I heard screaming." Clara moved, not away from the gun, but toward it, throwing off Morrison's aim. The gun went off. Clara cried out, and Jake's world went white-hot with rage. He didn't remember jumping from the loft, didn't remember crossing the room. One moment he was above, the next he had Morrison by the throat, slamming him into the wall. The gun went flying. Morrison tried to fight, but he was soft where Jake was iron, weak where Jake was desperate. They crashed over furniture, Morrison clawing at Jake's eyes, Jake's hands finding their mark. Morrison's face went red, then purple. Jake, stop!" Clara's voice, distant through the roar in his ears. "Don't kill him. We need him alive." Slowly, reluctantly, Jake loosened his grip. Morrison collapsed, gasping, clutching his throat. Jake stood over him, breathing hard, wanting nothing more than to finish what he'd started. "The key," Clara said. She was holding her shoulder, blood seeping between her fingers, but standing, always standing. "Samuel, tell us what the key opens. What was worth killing James?" Morrison looked up at them, hate and fear warring in his eyes. "Go to hell." Jake drew his Colt, pressed it to Morrison's knee. "Wrong answer." "Wait." Morrison held up his hands. All right. It's a safety deposit box. First Bank of San Francisco. James found gold, a vein so rich it would make Sutter's Mill look like pocket change. He filed the claim under a false name, hid all the documents in that bank. He laughed bitterly. Told me the night before he died. Taunted me with it. Said he was leaving it all to her, that I'd get nothing. My own brother. "So you poisoned him," Clara said quietly. "He gave me no choice." Morrison's mask finally slipped, revealing the monster beneath. "I was drowning in debt, creditors circling. I needed that money, deserved it. I'm the eldest. It should have been mine." His eyes fixed on Clara. "Give me the key, please. I'll sign anything, confess to anything. Just give me the key." Clara reached for the pouch at her throat, and for a moment Jake thought she might actually do it. Then she smiled, cold as justice. "No." Morrison lunged for her. Jake's Colt spoke once. Morrison looked down at the spreading red on his chest, surprise replacing rage. You shot me." "Yeah," Jake said. "I did." Samuel Morrison fell forward and didn't get up again. Outside, the storm was breaking, and Jake could hear horses, lots of them. Marshal Coleman, maybe, or more of Morrison's men. Either way, it was over. Clara swayed, and Jake caught her, easing her into a chair. The shoulder wound wasn't bad, but she'd lost blood. "Easy now. Let me see." "Tom," she whispered. "Is he?" Jake's jaw tightened. Through the window, he could see the barn's smoking ruins. "Yeah, he's gone." Clara closed her eyes, tears sliding down her cheeks. "He saved the horses, gave his life for animals." "He gave his life for friends," Jake corrected gently. Tom knew what mattered. The door burst open. Jake spun, gun raised, then lowered it. Marshal Coleman stood there, badge glinting. Taking in the scene, Morrison dead, Clara wounded, Jake standing guard like he'd done it all his life. "Mr. Sullivan," Coleman said finally. "Seems we need to talk." "Seems we do." Jake agreed. He kept his arm around Clara, supporting her. "But first, the lady needs a doctor. Everything else can wait." Coleman nodded, called for his men. As they worked to stop Clara's bleeding, she looked up at Jake. "We did it. It's over." "Part of it," Jake said. "Still got to get to San Francisco. Find out what James died protecting." "We?" Clara asked, hope and uncertainty mingling in her voice. Jake smiled, the expression feeling more natural than it had in 20 years. "Made you a promise. Didn't I said we'd see this through together? A lot of men make promises. I'm not a lot of men." Clara laughed, then winced as it pulled her shoulder. "No, Jake Sullivan. You're surely not." Outside, the snow was stopping, and somewhere beyond the mountains, San Francisco waited with its secrets. They'd bury Tom proper, see justice done for James, and then maybe, just maybe, two broken souls might find something worth more than gold, something worth living for, instead of just dying for. In the ruins of the barn, a horse whinnied one Tom had saved, life asserting itself despite death, hope growing in ashes. Jake held Clara closer and watched the sun break through the clouds, painting the snow-covered valley in shades of gold and promise. They'd won this battle. The war for their future was just beginning. The news spread through the territory like wildfire. In August, Samuel Morrison was dead, and the widow he'd hunted was alive. Within days of the shootout at Tom's ranch, every newspaper from Tucson to Phoenix carried the story. "Justice in the Snow," read one headline. "Murderous plot exposed," declared another. But the damage to Clara's reputation had been deep, and whispers followed her like shadows. Jake watched her try to hold her head high as they walked through Prescott's Main Street 2 weeks later. Her shoulder had healed clean, but the real wounds were harder to see. People crossed the street to avoid them. Women pulled their children close. Men spat in the dust as they passed. "Let me get the supplies," Jake said quietly. "You can wait at the hotel." Clara's spine straightened, that iron core showing through. "I'm not hiding anymore. They can whisper all they want." But Jake saw how her hands trembled, how she flinched when someone hissed "murderous" from a shop doorway. The truth hadn't set her free, it had just changed the shape of her cage. They were loading supplies when Marshal Coleman found them. The lawman looked tired, older than when they'd first met. "Sullivan, Mrs. Morrison, we need to talk." Jake's hand moved to his gun. "Thought we'd said all that needed saying." "Not quite." Coleman glanced around, lowered his voice. There's been developments. Can we speak privately? They followed him to his office, a small room above the bank that smelled of coffee and old paper. Coleman closed the door, pulled the blinds, then faced them with an expression that made Jake's gut tighten. Morrison had partners, Coleman said without preamble. Silent investors in his operations. They're not happy about his death. Self-defense, Jake said flatly. You were there. I know what happened. Coleman held up a hand. But these men have money, influence. They're pushing for a new investigation, claiming you murdered Morrison for the gold. Clara's face went pale. What gold we don't even know? They think you do. Morrison was into them for almost $50,000. They want that gold claim, and they'll tear apart anyone standing in their way. Coleman sat heavily. There's more. A federal judge in Tucson has agreed to review the case. Judge Harlan Prescott. Jake cursed. Prescott's reputation was darker than desert midnight. A hanging judge who could be bought for the right price. When? Clara asked quietly. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Coleman met their eyes. If I were you, I'd be in California by then. Once you're out of the territory. We run, Clara said bitterly. Again! You live, Coleman corrected. Sometimes that's victory enough. That night, in the small hotel room, they'd rented separate rooms for propriety, though Jake spent most nights in the chair by Clara's door. Standing guard, they made their decision. We leave tomorrow. Jake said, take the southern route through Yuma, then up to California. Hard traveling, but... Jake! Clara stood by the window, moonlight painting her in silver and shadow. What if they're right? About what? She turned to face him. About me. What if I am poison, everyone who helps me dies? James, Tom, how long before it's you? Jake crossed to her in 2 strides. Don't... Mrs. Patterson at the general store. She said I was cursed, said I carry death like... Jake kissed her. He hadn't meant to, hadn't planned it. One moment she was talking, the next his mouth was on hers, swallowing her words and doubts. She went still, then melted against him, hands fisting in his shirt. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jake kept his hands on her face. You listen to me, Clara Morrison. You're not cursed. You're not poison. You're the strongest, bravest woman I've ever known, and I'll shoot anyone who says different. Jake, I mean it. Morrison killed James. Morrison killed Tom. Not you, and I'll be damned if I let you carry their guilt. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I don't deserve... Neither do I, Jake said roughly. But here we are anyway. She kissed him then, soft and sweet and full of promise. When she pulled back, some of the shadows had left her eyes. Tomorrow, then California. California, Jake agreed. But tomorrow brought new troubles. Jake woke to pounding on his door. Coleman's voice urgent. Sullivan, open up. Clara emerged from her room, wrapper clutched tight. As Jake let the marshal in, Coleman's face was grim. They moved faster than I thought. Judge Prescott issued bench warrants for you both. Every lawman in the territory will be looking... How long do we have? Jake asked. Already calculating routes and supplies. My deputies are conveniently busy this morning. But by noon, maybe earlier, the word will be out. Coleman handed Jake a packet. Train tickets to Yuma, under false names. It's the best I can do. Clara stepped forward. Marshal Coleman, why are you... Because I've been a lawman 30 years, ma'am, and I know the difference between justice and law. What's happening here isn't justice. He touched his hat. Good luck. They were on the train within the hour. Clara dressed as a widow, which she was with Jake, playing her protective brother. The story held until Wickenburg, where a sharp-eyed deputy named Hollis recognized Jake from an old wanted poster. That's Jake Sullivan, Hollis announced, hand on his gun. Killer out of Colorado. And if that's Sullivan, then she's... Jake moved fast, but not to draw. Instead, he grabbed Clara and dove for cover as gunfire erupted. Someone else on the train was shooting not at them, but at the deputy. In the chaos, Jake saw a familiar face, Maria Garrett, Tom's daughter. "This way," Maria shouted, providing cover fire. "Hurry!" They followed her through the train cars, passengers screaming and ducking. At the mail car, Maria kicked open the side door. "Jump!" The train was slowing for a water stop, but still moving fast enough to make jumping dangerous. Jake went first, rolling with the impact, then caught Clara as she followed. Maria came last, graceful as a cat. "Maria," Jake gasped, helping Clara up. "What?" "Saving your worthless hides, apparently." Maria's smile was sharp as her father's had been. "Papa sent word before he died. Said if anything happened, I was to help you." Her face softened. "He said you were worth it." They ran for the rocks as shouts rose from the train. Maria had horses waiting, 3 good mounts with supplies already packed. "You've been following us," Clara said, wonder in her voice. "For a week," Maria confirmed. "Papa always said Jake Sullivan attracted trouble like honey draws flies. Figured you'd need help eventually." They rode hard through the day, stopping only to rest the horses as the sun set, painting the desert in blood and gold. Maria led them to a hidden canyon she'd scouted earlier. "We can't keep running forever," Clara said as they made camp. "Morrison's partners. The judge, they won't stop." "Then we stop running," Jake said. "We get to San Francisco, find that banker, claim whatever James left, use it to fight back." "With what army?" Maria asked. "It's 3 against the world." "4, a new voice said from the darkness. Jake's gun was in his hand instantly, but the man who stepped into their firelight held his hands high and empty. He was Chinese, elderly, wearing Eastern clothes that looked out of place in the desert. "Who are you?" Jake demanded. "My name is Chen Wei," the man said calmly. "Marcus Chen of San Francisco is my son. I believe you have something for him." Clara's hand went to the key at her throat. "How did you—" "James Morrison was my friend. Chen Wei said he saved my son's life once, long ago, when he wrote saying he was in danger, that he was sending his wife with the key." The old man shrugged. "I came to meet her. I was in Prescott when the trouble started." "Convenient," Jake said, gun still steady. "Not convenient, planned." Chen Wei smiled. "Mr. Sullivan, Mrs. Morrison, you have powerful enemies, but James had powerful friends. More than he knew." Maria laughed suddenly. 4 against the world just became 5. I like those odds better." Clara stood slowly, hand still on the key. "Mr. Chen, what did James find? What's worth all this death?" The old man's face grew serious. "Not just gold, Mrs. Morrison, a mountain of it. Yes, but more. James found evidence of claim jumping, murder, corruption reaching to the territorial governor himself, documents that could destroy a dozen powerful men." "Including Morrison's partners," Jake said, understanding dawning. "Especially them." Chen Wei nodded. James was gathering evidence to expose them all. The gold was just his insurance policy, enough wealth to fight them in court, to buy justice if necessary. "That's why they need me dead," Clara whispered, "not just for the gold, but to bury the evidence with me." "Exactly." Jake holstered his gun. Decision made. "Then we get to San Francisco. We get that evidence, and we end this proper." "It won't be easy," Chen Wei warned. "They'll have men watching the roads, the trains, the ports, and my son's bank is under surveillance." "Let them watch," Maria said, checking her rifle. "Tom Garrett's daughter doesn't run from a fight." Clara looked around their small circle, a gunslinger seeking redemption, a ranger's daughter honoring her father, an old Chinese man repaying a debt, And herself, a widow carrying her husband's last hope for justice. Not the army she'd have chosen, but maybe the one she needed. James used to say that right doesn't always win, she said softly. But wrong doesn't get to win easy. She pulled out the key, let it catch the firelight. We go to San Francisco, all of us, and we finish what James started. Jake moved to her side, solid as stone. Together. Together, the others echoed. In the distance, coyotes howled at the rising moon. The sound should have been threatening, but to Clara, it sounded like freedom. She'd been hunted long enough. Time to become the hunter. They had evidence to find, justice to claim, and powerful men to bring down. The odds were impossible, the danger extreme, but for the first time since James died, Clara felt something other than fear and grief. She felt hope. And in the desert darkness, with Jake's hand warm in hers and allies at her back, that felt like the beginning of victory. The blizzard hit them in the mountains above Flagstaff, turning the world into a howling white nightmare. They'd been climbing for 2 days, following Chen Wei's hidden route through the high passes, when the storm descended like God's own fury. There! Maria shouted over the wind, pointing to a dark smudge against the white. Shelter! The cabin was old, probably a trapper's refuge, but solid enough. They crowded inside with the horses, Jake immediately moving to secure the door while Maria checked for other entrances. Clara helped Chen Wei to a corner the old man was bearing up well, but the altitude and cold were taking their toll. We can't stay long, Jake said, though they all knew the truth. Nobody traveled in a storm like this. They were trapped until it passed. Clara busied herself with building a fire from the wood stacked against one wall. Her hands shook not from cold, but from what had happened that morning. They'd been ambushed at dawn. 10 men with rifles. Only Chen Wei's knowledge of the terrain had saved them. That and Jake's deadly accuracy. But Maria had taken a bullet across her ribs, and they were running low on ammunition. Let me see that wound, Clara told Maria, who was trying to act like she wasn't hurt. It's nothing. It's something if it gets infected. Clara's voice brooked no argument. She'd learned that tone from Ma Cunningham, found it worked wonders. As she cleaned and dressed Maria's wound, Jake stood guard at the window. The storm was getting worse, but that was good nobody could track them in this. Bad because they couldn't move either, and time was running out. Judge Prescott's warrant would have federal marshals looking for them by now. We're close, Chen Wei said quietly. He'd spread a map on the floor, marked with routes Clara didn't recognize. 2 days to the Nevada border, then the railroad to San Francisco. My son will be ready. If we live that long, Maria muttered, then hissed as Clara applied carbolic. We'll live, Jake said flatly. Come too far to die now. Clara finished with Maria's wound and moved to sit by Jake. The storm had darkened the day to twilight, and in the dim light, she could see the exhaustion carved into his face. He'd barely slept since they'd fled Prescott, always on watch, always ready. You need rest, she said softly. I need you safe. He didn't look at her, eyes still on the white void outside. Should have put you on a ship in Yuma, sent you around the Horn to California. Without you, Clara touched his arm. Never. I'm not worth. Don't. She moved closer, felt him tense, then relax. Don't tell me what you're worth. I know exactly what Jake Sullivan is worth. He finally looked at her then, and something in his eyes made her heart skip. Clara. The wind chose that moment to scream louder, rattling the cabin walls. But Clara barely noticed. She was lost in Jake's eyes, in the promise and pain she saw there. When this is over, Jake said roughly. When you're safe and Morrison's partners are in prison or in the ground, what then? Then we live, Clara said simply. Together, if you'll have me. Have you? Jake laughed, short and sharp. Woman, I'd follow you to hell and back. Already halfway there as it is. No, Clara said firmly. We're going the other direction. We're going toward the light, Jake, toward justice and freedom and... The door exploded inward. Jake moved faster than thought, shoving Clara behind him as he drew. His Colt roared in the confined space, dropping the first man through the door. Maria rolled despite her wound, came up shooting. Chen Wei, moving with surprising speed for his age, threw something that flashed in the firelight, a knife that took the second attacker in the throat. But more were coming. The storm hadn't stopped them. Morrison's partners had sent their best killers, men who'd tracked through hell itself for the right price. The horses, Jake shouted, laying down covering fire. Back door. They fought their way through the cabin, Jake leading, Maria covering their retreat despite the blood soaking through her bandages. Clara had Tom's gun, the one she'd kept since Coyote Springs, and she used it now with desperate accuracy. The horses were screaming, panicked by the gunfire and storm. Chen Wei was already mounted when Jake lifted Clara into her saddle. A bullet whined past her ear. Another struck the wall beside her. Ride. Jake slapped her horse's rump, sending it plunging into the storm. The world became a chaos of white and wind and gunfire. Clara could barely see Jake beside her. Maria and Chen Wei just shadows in the blizzard. Behind them, shouts and more shots. But the storm was their ally now, hiding them in its fury. They rode blind, trusting the horses and Chen Wei's direction. Time lost meaning. There was only the cold, the wind, the desperate need to keep moving. Clara's hands went numb on the reins, her face numb despite the scarf wrapped around it. Then Jake was there, reaching across to steady her. Canyon ahead, he shouted. Chen Wei knows a cave. The cave was more of a cut in the rock face, but deep enough to shelter them and the horses. They crowded in, shaking with cold and exhaustion. Maria slumped against the wall, fresh blood on her coat. How many? Jake asked Chen Wei. I counted 8, maybe more. The old man was checking his rifle with steady hands. They'll follow when the storm breaks. Then we make our stand here. Jake looked around the cave, calculating. Good sight lines. Only one way in. Defensible. If they had enough ammunition. No, Clara said suddenly. No more defense. No more running. She pulled out the key, held it up. They want this. Let them have it. Jake frowned. Clara, listen. She moved to the cave mouth, raised her voice to carry over the wind. I know you're out there, Morrison's dogs, coming to finish his work. She held the key higher. You want this? Come and take it. Clara, get back, Jake started, but she wasn't done. I challenge your best man, she shouted. Single combat if he wins. You get the key and we ride away. If he loses, you turn back and tell Morrison's partners the widow is under protection. Silence except for the wind. Then, incredibly, laughter. A man emerged from the storm, tall, lean, wearing a long coat that whipped in the wind. Clara recognized him from wanted posters. Luke Bartlett, sometimes called the Reaper. 30 kills, maybe more. Mrs. Morrison. Bartlett touched his hat politely. That's a brave offer, but I don't fight women. Then fight me, Jake said, stepping forward. Jake, no, Clara started. Yes, Jake's voice was granite. You want the key? Bartlett, go through me. Bartlett studied him. Jake Sullivan. Heard you were fast, back in the day, but that was before you went soft. His smile was winter cold. Single combat, then, when you're dead, the woman gives us the key and rides away free. My word on it. Your word, Jake said. Worth about as much as Morrison's was. Maybe, but it's what you've got. Bartlett moved back, creating space. When you're ready, Sullivan. Clara grabbed Jake's arm. Don't do this, please! Jake looked down at her, and his smile was gentle as spring rain. Trust me. He walked out into the storm. Bartlett facing him across 20 feet of swirling snow. The other gunmen emerged like ghosts, forming a rough circle. Clara saw their faces, hard men who'd seen too much killing, done too much of it themselves. "Anytime. Sullivan," Bartlett called. Jake stood relaxed, hand easy by his gun. The wind howled between them, driving snow like bullets. Clara held her breath, time stretching like taffy. Bartlett moved first, faster than anyone Clara had ever seen. His gun was clearing leather when Jake's bullet took him center chest. Bartlett's shot went wild, his face showing surprise as he fell to his knees in the snow. "Damn," he gasped. "You really are that fast." Jake walked over, looked down at the dying man. "Yeah, I am." Bartlett coughed blood, managed a smile. "The woman! She played us. That ain't the real key, is it?" Jake said nothing. Bartlett laughed, choked, went still. The other gunmen stood frozen, processing what they'd just seen. Their best man, dropped like a greenhorn. Jake Sullivan, standing in the storm like death itself. "Anyone else?" Jake asked quietly. They looked at each other, at Bartlett's body, at the cave where Maria had her rifle trained on them. One by one, they backed away, mounting their horses, disappearing into the storm. The last one paused, called out, "This ain't over, Sullivan." "It never is," Jake replied. When they were gone, he walked back to the cave. Clara threw herself at him, shaking with relief and cold and something else. "The key," she whispered. "How did Bartlett know?" Jake smiled. "He didn't. He was guessing, but it got me thinking." He looked at Chen Wei. "That map of yours, it doesn't lead to San Francisco, does it?" Chen Wei's weathered face cracked in a smile. "Very perceptive. Mr. Sullivan, no, it leads to Virginia City. My nephew runs a bank there, safer than San Francisco, where Morrison's partners have eyes everywhere." "The real key?" Maria asked. Clara pulled it out not from the pouch at her throat, but from inside her boot. "James was clever. The key everyone's seen, the one I've been guarding so obviously. It opens a music box he gave me. This one." She held up a plainer key, unadorned iron. "This is what they're really after." Jake laughed, really laughed. "For the first time in days. You've been running a bluff this whole time." "Learned from the best," Clara said, smiling. "James always said misdirection was the key to survival." The storm was breaking, weak sunlight filtering through. They were bloodied, exhausted, low on supplies, but they were alive and closer to their goal. "We should move." Chen Wei said, "They'll regroup. Come back with more men." "Let them come," Jake said, checking his weapons. "We've got truth on our side, evidence that'll bring them down, and we've got each other." Clara looked at their small group, battered but unbroken. Maria, fierce despite her wounds. Chen Wei, wise and deadly. And Jake, her guardian, her gunfighter, her future. "Mount up," she said, steel in her voice. "We've got justice to deliver." They rode out of the cave into clearing weather. 4 against an army, but no longer running. The real fight was coming. Clara knew, but for the first time since James died, she was ready for it. Behind them, Luke Bartlett's body disappeared beneath fresh snow, another ghost in a land full of them. Ahead, the mountains opened like a promise, and somewhere beyond them, the truth waited to set them free. Or kill them trying. The evidence was more damning than any of them had imagined. In the vault of Chen Wei's nephew's bank in Virginia City, Clara opened the safety deposit box with trembling hands. Inside were documents that painted a picture of corruption reaching from Arizona territory to Washington itself. "My God," Marshal Coleman breathed, reading over her shoulder. He'd arrived that morning with 2 federal marshals, answering the telegram Jake had sent. "This lists judges, senators, territorial governors." All bought and paid for, Clara said quietly. James spent 3 years gathering this. Look here. She pointed to a ledger. Records of bribes, claim jumping operations, even murders disguised as accidents. Jake stood guard by the door, ever watchful. They'd been in Virginia City for 2 days, and already he'd spotted men watching the hotel, the bank. Morrison's partners weren't giving up. This is enough to bring them all down, Coleman said. But we need to get it to the right people. Judge Harlan Prescott is mentioned here. He can't oversee any trial. There's a federal judge in San Francisco. One of Coleman's marshals suggested. Judge Catherine Thornton. She's got a reputation for being incorruptible. A woman judge? Maria asked, surprised. Appointed last year. If anyone will give us a fair hearing, it's her. Coleman gathered the documents carefully. But getting there alive is another matter. Chen Wei's nephew, Marcus Chen, younger version of his father, but with the same sharp intelligence, spread a map on his desk. There's a train leaving tonight for Sacramento. From there, a riverboat to San Francisco. I can arrange private cars, guards. No. Jake's voice was flat. They'll expect that. Hit us on the train or the river. Nowhere to run. He studied the map. We go overland. Split up. Make them divide their forces. That's madness, Coleman protested. Mrs. Morrison needs protection. Mrs. Morrison has proven she can protect herself. Clara interrupted. Jake's right. Together. We're one target. Apart. We're harder to track. They spent the afternoon planning. Coleman and his marshals would take half the evidence on the train, making themselves obvious targets. Chen Wei and Marcus would go by stage, carrying duplicates. Jake, Clara, and Maria would ride overland with the originals, taking the old immigrant trail through the mountains. That night, in the hotel room Clara had taken, she and Jake stood at the window watching the street. The watchers were still there, patient as wolves. You could stay here, Jake said quietly. Let us carry the documents. You've done enough, risked enough. Clara turned to face him. James died for this. Tom died for this. I'm seeing it through. Stubborn woman. You love that about me. The word hung between them like a challenge. Love. Neither had said it, though it lived in every glance, every protective gesture, every desperate moment they'd survived together. Yes, Jake said simply. I do. Clara's breath caught. Jake! He kissed her, deep and desperate, like a man trying to capture eternity in a moment. When they parted, he kept her close, memorizing her face. When this is over, he said roughly. When these bastards are in prison or in the ground, when you're safe, I want to do this proper. Court you like you deserve. Take you dancing, bring you flowers. All of it. I don't need flowers, Clara whispered. I just need you. You have me, every broken, scarred piece. A knock interrupted them. Maria entered, took one look at them standing close, and smiled. Sorry to interrupt the courting, but we've got problems. 3 more guns just rode in. Kellerman brothers, out of Texas. Jake cursed. The Kellermans were known manhunters, trackers who never lost a trail. Then we leave tonight? Forget the plan. No. Clara moved to the dresser, began checking her weapons with steady hands. We stick to the plan. Let them follow us. Draw them away from Coleman and the evidence. Clara? She's right, Maria said. We're the fighters. Let Coleman be the lawyer. We do what we do best. At midnight, they slipped out the back of the hotel. The horses were saddled and waiting, supplies packed. Marcus Chen pressed a letter into Clara's hand. For Judge Thornton, my family has influence in San Francisco. This will ensure she listens. They rode out under a cold moon, taking the mountain trail. Behind them, Virginia City slept unaware of the drama playing out in its shadows. Ahead lay 300 miles of rough country, and somewhere in that vastness, men who wanted them dead. They'd been riding 2 hours when Jake herded horses behind them, moving fast. "Company," he said tersely. "How many?" Maria asked, already checking her rifle. 3, maybe 4. Jake scanned the terrain. "There, that ravine. We'll make them come to us." They positioned themselves among the rocks, waiting. The Kellerman brothers were good, but they were also confident. They rode straight into the ambush. Jake took the first one, a clean shot that knocked him from the saddle. Maria got the second. The third, the eldest Kellerman, dove for cover, returning fire with deadly accuracy. Bullets whined off rocks, showering them with chips. "Sullivan," Kellerman shouted, "give us the woman and the documents you can right away." "Getting tired of that offer?" Jake called back. "Morrison's partners are offering 10,000 now, dead or alive." Clara laughed, high and wild. "Tell them to make it 20, I'm worth at least that." Her audacity must have surprised Kellerman, because he showed himself for just a moment. It was enough. Clara's shot took him in the shoulder, spinning him around. Jake finished it. They rode hard through the rest of the night, pushing the horses to their limits. At dawn, they rested in a grove of pines, sharing water and hardtack. "That was good shooting," Maria told Clara. "Tom would have been proud." "I had good teachers," Clara replied, but her hands shook as she reloaded. The killing was necessary, but it still cost her. Jake saw it, moved closer, offering silent comfort. They were 2 days into the mountains when the real trouble found them. Not gunmen this time, but nature itself. The weather turned vicious, unseasonable snow making the trail treacherous. They were forced to seek shelter in an abandoned mining camp, huddling together for warmth while the wind howled outside. "We're sitting ducks here," Maria muttered, teeth chattering. "Better than freezing to death." Jake replied he'd built a small fire, knowing the smoke might draw enemies, but judging the cold the greater threat. Clara sat between them, the document pouch clutched against her chest. In the firelight, Jake could see the exhaustion wearing on her, dark circles under her eyes, cheeks hollow from days of hard travel and little food. "Tell me about James," he said suddenly. "Not the investigation. Him." Clara looked surprised, then smiled. "He loved to sing, terrible voice. Couldn't carry a tune in a bucket, but he'd sing while he worked. Drove the cattle crazy." Her smile widened. "He read everything he could get his hands on. Shakespeare, penny dreadfuls, scientific journals. Said a man should feed his mind like his body." "Sounds like a good man." He would have liked you, I think, respected you." Clara looked at Jake directly. "He would have wanted me to be happy." "Are you happy?" "Getting there," she said softly. "Despite everything, despite all this, yes, getting there." The storm broke near dawn. They pushed on, knowing they'd lost precious time. The documents seemed to grow heavier with each mile, weighted with the lives they'd cost and the justice they promised. On the 4th day, they saw the smoke. San Francisco lay spread before them like a promise, the bay glittering in afternoon sun. They'd made it bloodied, exhausted, but alive. "Don't celebrate yet," Jake warned. "Morrison's partners know where we're heading. The city means witnesses, but it also means ambush points on every corner." They entered through the old Mission District, keeping to side streets. Marcus Chen's letter had included an address, a safe house in Chinatown where they could rest and plan their approach to the courthouse. But as they turned onto DuPont Street, Jake's instincts screamed warning. Too quiet, too empty for afternoon. "Trap," he said, already reaching for his gun. The gunfire erupted from everywhere at once. Windows, doorways, rooftops. Morrison's partners had brought an army. Jake's horse screamed and fell. He rolled clear, dragging Clara with him into an alley. Maria wasn't so lucky. A bullet took her in the chest, knocking her from her saddle. She hit the ground hard, tried to rise, fell back. "Maria?" Clara started toward her, but Jake held her back as more bullets peppered the ground around Tom Garrett's daughter. "She's gone," Jake said harshly. "We can't help her." But Maria wasn't done. Bleeding, dying. She still had fight left. She rolled to her knees, rifle coming up, and her last shots cleared a path. "Go!" she screamed. "Finish it!" Jake and Clara ran, the documents clutched between them. As behind them, Maria Garrett made her last stand. They could hear her rifle speaking defiance until it finally, terribly, stopped. They burst from the alley onto Market Street, crowded with afternoon traffic, safety and witnesses, Jake thought. But then he saw them men converging from all directions, badges glinting, but wrong badges, bought badges. "The courthouse!" Clara gasped. "2 blocks!" They ran through the crowd, pursued by shouts and gunfire. Civilians scattered, screaming. A fruit cart exploded as bullets struck it. A horse reared, throwing its rider. 1 block. Jake could see the courthouse steps, the promise of real law, real justice. But the fake marshals were closing in. Then, miracle of miracles, real federal marshals poured from the courthouse, led by a woman in judge's robes, Catherine Thornton herself, flanked by armed men with legitimate badges. "Stand down," Judge Thornton's voice carried like thunder. "These people are under federal protection." The bought lawmen hesitated, caught between their employers and real authority. In that moment of confusion, Jake and Clara reached the courthouse steps. "Your Honor," Clara gasped, thrusting the documents forward. "Evidence of corruption, murder, conspiracy. James Morrison died gathering this." Judge Thornton took the pouch, her face grave. "Then we'll ensure he didn't die in vain. Marshals, arrest those men." What followed was chaos, some of the corrupt lawmen surrendering, others trying to flee. Jake kept Clara behind him, watching for any last desperate attempt on her life. But it was over. The evidence was safe. In the hands of honest law, the truth would out. Later, in Judge's chambers, as Clara gave her statement and the documents were cataloged, Jake stood by the window watching the sun set over San Francisco Bay. They'd done it. At terrible cost, James, Tom, Maria, others along the way, but they'd done it. Clara appeared at his elbow, slipping her hand into his. "What now?" she asked quietly. Jake pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, gunpowder and trail dust and something uniquely Clara. "Now we live," he said. "Now we build something new on all this death. Together. Always." Outside, San Francisco sprawled in all its rough glory. Somewhere out there, powerful men were realizing their empires were crumbling. Justice was coming, slow and inevitable as sunrise. But in that quiet moment, Jake Sullivan and Clara Morrison stood together, 2 broken souls who'd found wholeness in each other. The fight was over. The healing could begin. And in the document pouch, among the evidence of so much evil, lay one last paper, James Morrison's final letter to his wife. Never sent. In it, he'd written, "Find love again. Clara, find someone who'll stand with you against the world. You deserve that light after so much darkness." Looking at Jake, seeing her future in his eyes, Clara smiled through her tears. She'd found it. The trial of Morrison's partners became the sensation of San Francisco. For 3 weeks, the federal courthouse overflowed with spectators, journalists, and curiosity seekers. Clara testified for 2 full days, her voice steady as she recounted James's death, the pursuit, the attempts on her life. Jake sat in the gallery, never taking his eyes off her, hand ready should anyone try one last desperate act. When the verdicts came down guilty on all counts, the courtroom erupted. 12 men, including 2 judges, a senator, and several prominent businessmen, would spend their remaining years in federal prison. The Morrison crime empire, built on blood and lies, crumbled in a single afternoon. Marshal Coleman found Jake and Clara on the courthouse steps afterward. Snow was falling, unusual for San Francisco, dusting the city in pristine white. "It's over," Coleman said simply. Really over. The warrants have been withdrawn. Your name's cleared. You're free. Free. The word felt strange to Clara, like clothes that didn't quite fit. She'd been running so long, fighting so hard, that freedom seemed almost anticlimactic. What about the gold? Coleman asked. James's claim it's legally yours now. Clara looked at Jake, then back at Coleman. Use it to compensate the victims, the families of men Morrison had killed, the miners whose claims were stolen. Let something good come from all this death. Coleman's weathered face showed surprise, then deep respect. That's a fortune you're giving up. I've got what I need, Clara said, taking Jake's hand. They walked through the snowy streets, no destination in mind, just needing to move, to process that it was truly finished. They ended up at the harbor, watching ships come and go, their lights twinkling in the gathering dusk. No more running, Jake said quietly. No more killing, Clara added. No more fear. They stood in comfortable silence. Then Clara asked, What do we do now? We've been fighting so long. I don't know how to just live. Jake turned to face her, snow catching in his dark hair. Well, I made you a promise about doing things proper. Before Clara could respond, he dropped to one knee in the snow, pulling out a simple gold ring. Clara Morrison, you've made me remember how to hope, how to love, how to be more than just a gun for hire. Would you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Clara's hand flew to her mouth, tears spilling down her cheeks. Jake Sullivan, you impossible man. Yes, of course yes. He slipped the ring on her finger with hands that had been rock-steady in gunfights, but trembled now. When he stood, she threw her arms around him, and they kissed there in the falling snow while ships' horns sang celebration in the bay. 3 days later, they stood before Judge Thornton in her chambers. Marshal Coleman served as Jake's best man, while Chen Wei gave Clara away. It was a small ceremony, just a handful of witnesses. But Clara wouldn't have changed it. These were the people who'd stood by them, who'd believed in justice when the world seemed dark. Do you, Jake Sullivan, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife? Judge Thornton asked. I do, Jake said, his voice carrying all the weight of his promises. Do you, Clara Morrison, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband? I do, Clara whispered, then stronger. I do. Then, by the power vested in me by the federal government and the state of California, I pronounce you husband and wife. When Jake kissed his bride, Chen Wei clapped. Coleman grinned. And somewhere, Clara felt, James and Tom and Maria were smiling too. The reception was held at Chen Wei's restaurant in Chinatown, a feast of cultures coming together. As the evening wore on, Jake found himself watching Clara laugh with Chen Wei's family, her face glowing with a joy he'd thought neither of them would ever feel again. She's good for you, Coleman said, joining him. Both of you, actually, like broken pieces that fit together to make something whole. What about you, Marshal, what's next? Coleman smiled. Back to Arizona. A lot of cleanup work after Morrison's network fell apart. Though I hear they're looking for a sheriff here in San Francisco. Might be time for a change. As the night deepened, Jake and Clara slipped away to the small hotel where they'd taken a room. But as they walked through the gaslit streets, Clara suddenly stopped. Wait, she said. There's something we need to do. She led him to a telegraph office, still open despite the late hour. At her request, the operator sent a message to Dustwater, to Ma Cunningham. Safe in San Francisco. Married today. Truth won. Thank you for believing. Clara and Jake Sullivan. Now it's finished, Clara said softly. They were heading back to the hotel when they herded horses, moving fast. Too fast for city streets at night. Jake's hand went automatically to his gun, old habits dying hard. But the rider who appeared wasn't an enemy. It was Marcus Chen Wei's son, his face bright with excitement. Mrs. Sullivan, Mr. Sullivan, I'm sorry to disturb your wedding night, but my father sent me. There's news from Virginia City. Jake tensed. What kind of news? Maria Garrett, she's alive. Clara gasped, clutching Jake's arm. But we saw her fall. Badly wounded. Yes, but not dead. A doctor found her after the fight. Managed to save her. She's been recovering these 3 weeks. Too stubborn to die. He says she wants to see you both. Clara looked at Jake, joy and disbelief warring on her face. She's alive. Tom's daughter is alive. Then we go to her, Jake said immediately. First train in the morning. Actually, Marcus smiled. My father anticipated that. He's arranged a private car on tonight's late train, if you're willing. Clara laughed, wild and free. Of course we're willing, Jake. She's alive. 2 hours later, they were aboard the train, racing through the night toward Virginia City, in their private compartment. Clara curled against Jake's side, her wedding ring catching the lamplight. Some honeymoon, she murmured. You complaining? Never. She kissed him softly. Jake, when we see Maria, when we know she's truly all right, what then, where do we go? Jake considered. For 20 years, he'd been a man without a home, without a future, living day to day on the edge of violence. Now he had a wife, friends, possibilities spreading before them like an unwritten map. California's growing, he said finally. Lots of towns needing good lawmen. Or maybe we buy some land, try ranching, or, he smiled, or we figure it out together, day by day. No more plans beyond staying alive and loving each other. I like that plan. The train raced on through the darkness, carrying them toward reunion and whatever future they chose to write. Behind them, San Francisco slept under its unusual blanket of snow. The trial was over. Justice served. The past lay to rest. But this wasn't an ending. It was a beginning. In Virginia City, Maria Garrett was indeed alive, weak but recovering, full of her father's fighting spirit. When Jake and Clara entered her room, she grinned despite the bandages. Took you long enough, she said. Had to go and get married without me. You were busy getting shot, Clara replied, tears streaming down her face as she carefully embraced Tom's daughter. Don't ever do that again. Can't promise that, Maria said. Garrett blood, you know. We're too ornery to die easy. Her eyes found Jake. Thank you for finishing what we started. We finished it, Jake corrected. All of us. Later, as they left the hospital, Clara took Jake's arm, leaning into his warmth. The sun was setting over Virginia City, painting the mountains in shades of gold and crimson. It was, Jake thought, the most beautiful sunset he'd ever seen. Not because of the colors, but because he was seeing it with clear eyes, unburdened heart, and the woman he loved beside him. You know what James wrote in his last letter? Clara said suddenly. He said to find someone who'd stand with me against the world. Did you? Jake asked, though he knew the answer. I did, she smiled up at him. I found you. They walked on into the sunset, toward whatever tomorrow might bring. They'd faced down death, corruption, and the darkest parts of human nature. They'd lost friends, found allies, discovered love in the most unlikely circumstances. The Wild West was changing, becoming something new. The age of gunfighters and outlaws was ending, replaced by law and order and civilization. But Jake and Clara Sullivan had found something timeless, a love forged in fire, tested by trials, stronger than any storm. As they reached their hotel, Jake paused at the door. No regrets. Clara thought of James, of the life she'd lost, the innocence burned away. Then she thought of the man beside her, the future stretching ahead, the justice they'd won. No regrets, she said firmly. Only gratitude. Jake smiled and led his wife inside, toward their first night of a lifetime together. Outside, the stars emerged one by one, eternal witnesses to another Wild West love story, one that had begun in violence but ended in hope. And in the quiet of the desert night, the wind carried whispers of those who'd fallen along the way, blessing the living who carried on their fight for truth, justice, and love. The end. Thank you so much for listening to this Wild West love story. If you're enjoying this tale, please let me know in the comments where you're listening from. I'd love to connect with you and hear your thoughts about Jake and Clara's journey. Please subscribe to my channel Wild West Night. Give this video a like and hit that hype button to help more people discover these frontier stories of love, justice, and redemption. Until next time, partners.